and welcome. Today's guest is Lashana Vines. Lashana was born and raised in East Orange, New Jersey, but has made her way to Georgia. She moved here at the age of 15. She's the proud mother of two, a 22-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter. She received her bachelor's degree from Shorter University and is currently pursuing her master's. She's working in healthcare but does have a passion for social services, and she does work in that passion serving for CASA. She's also serving as a facilitator for divorce care with her church Victory Church, and she's been doing that for the last 3 years. In November of 2018, Lashana self-published her first book, which is titled Finding the Treasure Through the Storm, Healing After Divorce, to encourage women that healing after divorce God's way was possible and obtainable. And that's what brings her here today. She wants to speak and let other women know how you can heal from divorce and how you can help your daughter heal. So we'd like to welcome her today. Welcome, Lashana.
Thank you so much for having me. This is just an honor to be here and to be asked to come and share with the mothers and daughters that are going to be watching this. So this is like my two loves coming together of youth, because I served in youth for several years, and divorce care, because that's where I've been serving. So thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And those are the reasons why I asked you to come on too. I was like, she will be the perfect fit for this. So I think God orchestrated that perfectly.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind your book.
Oh gosh, it was definitely God, because as I mentioned in my book, over 50% of marriages are ending in divorce. And not everybody's talking about it. You know, it's such a situation where you feel so much shame, and I was like, didn't want to talk about it, you know, kind of just brush it under the rug and move on with my life, you know. And it wasn't until maybe, I would say 5 years after being divorced, God began to prick my heart about going back. You know, it was like basically Him telling me to go back and help those and let them see what I did through you, and let them know that healing my way is obtainable. So that was definitely my heart, you know, especially when we get to a place in life where we just want to be used by God. And it took several years. So that is why we're here today.
That is so encouraging to hear too, that it took you some time to get there. And I want women to know that it may not happen overnight, or that it is a process. So for you to be so authentic and share that with us today, I think is a lot of women will find encouraging, because you do sometimes feel like you're the only one and what's wrong with you. So to hear you say that your book was birthed after you experiencing, okay, God, I'm ready to heal. I want other people to know that it took me a while, but there are tools, and I found them, and I want to share them. So
Absolutely.
that is wonderful. So can you tell us how long ago did you get divorced, and when that initially happened? How long has it been?
It's been 13 years now.
Okay.
I got divorced in 2007.
So you are a long way away from the initial impact and everything like that. So you have seen transition over a long term, which gives you a great perspective in my mind, like that, because it gives you a great perspective. Because some people may find themselves, there are some women who are probably just now going through it, may have just received separation papers, or have only been in it a year or 2 or 3. And so for you to come with your perspective 13 years later, I know it's going to be such a key and a tool to help others. So LaShawna, we all know that divorce is incredibly painful. It's painful for everyone involved. But what I liked in your book is that you explained it in a brilliant way. You said that you compared it to the ripping. Can you elaborate and explain that for us and the viewers, what the ripping is?
Yes, I thought it was very important to highlight that, because when you get married, no one walks down the aisle on their wedding day anticipating their divorce date.
No.
So I correlated that with Mark 10:8, where he talks about the two becomes one flesh.
Mhm.
And I thought that was so important to remind people that are going through a separation or a divorce. There's this season where you're going to deal with all these feelings of resentment, anger, frustration, fear. There's like this tangled ball of emotions that you deal with
Mhm.
through that season. So I thought it was important to talk about you're going through a separation phase where you were supposed to be till death do you part
Mhm.
together. So you're coming away and just there's just ripping that's being taken place. And at the same time, you're dealing with a lot of losses. You know, you're losing family. You know, I remember I lost my ex-husband's family. He had a very large, close-knit family, something I didn't have personally in my own family. So I remember losing his family. You lose friends because when you get married, his friends become your friends and your friends become his friends. And then when you go through a separation and divorce, there's like this automatic choice that people have to
choose
make.
teams or sides.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's very
That's
challenging, and I thought it was important just to talk about that because a lot of people they, you know, beat up on themselves, thinking like I should just be over this, and I thought it was important to talk about that season where you just you're being ripped apart, right, basically,
Yeah.
from that one flesh to now becoming two individual people again.
That is so great. And I took some notes from your book. Your book was phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.
I really enjoyed it. And some of the things, and I wanted to share with the audience what you said. You said that during the ripping, women are likely to experience a number of emotions. And I wanted to name some of them. Anxiety, rage, envy, fear, sadness, distrust, pain, resentment, helplessness, bitterness, loneliness, anger, and you likened it to drowning in emotions. And I think that is so fitting, and a lot of women can identify with that. Like you feel like you are just being overcome and overwhelmed with emotion after emotion. So I just wanted to share that with our viewers. Like that is normal.
Yes.
That's a normal part of the process. And then there was also something that you mentioned that I haven't heard other people say. In your book, you said that a divorce, many people compare it to a death. But it's different because in death, you have a community of supporters who encourage you to grieve. And in divorce, that's not the case. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Right. One of the things, or one of the reasons I mentioned that was because in death, you know, you have everyone rallying around you for a season. You have family, friends from all over that are just there for you know, cooking for you. It's just, there's a big community of support in that season for your life if a spouse passes away. Divorce is different in a sense. You know, you look at it as a death because it is the death of that marriage.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like you kind of get isolated, pushed to the side. You're dealing with the shame so heavily because I've spoken to women that just didn't tell their families. Like people in the family didn't even know, and they would just come around their families and, you know, just like family members would ask them, how is so and so, and they would just go along like, oh, they're fine, and never really talk about it. So that was the first thing that you realize, where you don't have that community of people around because or again, you're being rejected by family. You know, sometimes in situations where the spouse's mom will just basically take the husband's side.
Yeah, like you were saying
in
earlier,
that.
the
Yeah,
taking of sides and choosing teams.
right.
So that community there to help you while you're grieving, it's just not
Exactly.
something that you experience, which is you're experiencing all of those emotions that we said that are very similar to a death, but you don't have that support as you go through your grief. So like you were saying, the lack of community as you're trying to process the grief. And you gave us some tools to recognize the stages, because you said that women will go through stages, and because she's drowning in emotion, she may not recognize what those stages are. So I want to go ahead and walk through each stage. So there are 5, and they are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So, can you tell us a little bit about what denial looks like? I know it sounds kind of obvious, but can you just give us some examples of what that might look like
From
at the denial stage?
yeah, for me personally, it was a denial of not wanting to believe what was happening. I remember when my ex-husband initially told me that he wanted a divorce, I just, couldn't believe it, or I just figured, oh, we're going to work through this,
Yeah.
we're going to get counseling, it's going to be okay. He's just saying whatever according to his feelings,
Right.
because we know feelings are fleeting.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I'm like, we said I do, we committed to this, so it's going to be okay. And it was a season of a year where I was praying. You as a wife, you want to, make special meals. You want to, up your game a little bit to show your spouse that you are in this for the fight. So I just believe that that was a part of the denial phase, where for me personally, where you're just like, this is not happening, we're going to work through this. And then when it does happen, when that separation does happen or divorce does happen, you can stay there and, just be like, this is not happening to me. And that will stagnate that process of walking towards the healing.
Right. So then denial then gives way to anger, which is kind of, that also one seems a little bit obvious, but you become angry. So once the denial starts to fade and you're starting to say, okay, wait, this is really happening.
Right.
So then tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, so anger was my go-to emotion for me personally. Shout out to all the women that don't deal with anger because that was me. And what I learned over time is anger is kind of wrapped up, it's kind of a secondary emotion. So the anger is wrapped up in fear or frustration or self-preservation or whatever it is. And
that's good. So I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but you said something that was really good, that anger is a secondary emotion. And prior to you even stating that, I don't know if I even thought about it that way. That anger is a secondary emotion, so it's usually rooted in fear, which makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to highlight that because that was a really good nugget.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it was that anger because I was fearful, because I was frustrated, because I needed to self-preserve. And a lot of times that can come out in the physical, where you can want to physically harm your spouse, or you're just angry at the world, you're angry at work, you're angry at the drive-through people. It's just like you just carry on this anger inside of you because you're wounded and you're trying to self-preserve. So that is definitely an emotion that I've seen dealt with in myself personally and in a lot of women that I have walked on the journey of separation and divorce.
Wow. And then the anger gives way to the bargaining. So then what happens when you enter the bargaining phase?
I guess the bargaining was, for me personally, was in the marriage when I was fighting for the relationship, fighting for the marriage, and bargaining with God, bargaining with Him, and, what do we need to do, and begging God, because before this all, and before I encountered Him, not wanting the marriage, my relationship with Christ was just on a sand foundation, it wasn't on a solid foundation. So in that moment, when we're like, God, if you do this, I'll, do this. Or God, if you heal my marriage and save my marriage, I'll honor you in this and that. I was trying to bargain with God in those moments. So those are definitely moments where I found myself bargaining with the Lord, like
almost in desperation, like, God, just if you do this, you're God, you're a miracle worker. I need you to come through on this.
Exactly. Because He can do it. He can.
If anyone can do it, then God can do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then after the bargaining doesn't work, it goes into depression. So can you speak a little bit about that?
Yes. Depression definitely runs in my family, and so it was kind of like a go-to, and it can happen over a long period of time. You have to be clinically depressed 2 weeks or more, So divorce is definitely something that can just catapult you into that depression. You just don't have any desire to do anything. You know, you're just lifeless almost. So I remember I didn't deal with the depression that put me or I didn't go to my doctor and say, hey, I need some medication. I was still functioning because I had the children and I had to move forward. But I had the depression where when the kids were gone, either my daughter was with her dad or whatever, I just got in my bed Friday evening and I didn't get up again unless my son had a football game on that Saturday. It was just a season where you're just sad and you're crying and you're just, anything can make you cry, So it was definitely a challenging season that I had never experienced before, the divorce. But definitely I've seen cases where, women have said that they had to go and get on medication just so they can function. And it's okay. I love that about divorce care and anyone who talks about this season. Even if you have to get on the medication for a short season, it's okay, because that seems like a taboo too, where it's like, oh no, God is going to heal me and God is going to take care of it. Yes, he is, but he also put these people on earth to help us through this season,
To help you through this healing process, what that looks like. And then after depression, there comes a level of acceptance. And then what does that look like?
Acceptance is like a bittersweet emotion, I believe, because it kind of, it reminds you that, this is over. You have to move forward. But then there's a peace. I just know that it's a God peace that he sends in these moments to his daughters and to his sons. I don't want to, I know we're talking to women and their daughters, but I don't want to discount the men. Right. They hurt too. They go through the same emotions. So I believe that the acceptance is a peace that God gives us, and he gave me personally, that says, you're going to get through this. I'm going to help you get through this. It's just a process. Yeah, it sucks, but you're going to get through this. And that is the turning point, I believe, where you can go forward and you can just take the steps towards healing, whatever that looks like, through counseling, through joining a divorce care class, where you can have that community. So the acceptance, again, is like a bittersweet, where you're like, that chapter is over. I have to move on. But now what is ahead? And finding that hope in Christ and saying, okay, there's something on the other side of this. And it's going to be amazing. And it's going to be good. It's not going to be the dream and the hope I had on that wedding day when I walked down that aisle. But it has to be something better. So I love the acceptance, because it like I said, it gives you that turning point.
That's so good to know that you can get to the point of acceptance. And you have obviously gotten there. You're now a facilitator for divorce care.
Yes.
But you're not perfect. You did share in your book that you stayed in the anger stage for 3 years.
Yes.
So I don't want the viewers to think that, LaShawna is perfect, and that's easy for her to say, like, no, it was still a process for you.
Right.
But what you have found is that you said also that through the tools, through divorce care, you have been able to see people just as broken, just as devastated, with the tools of divorce care, be able to come out and make real progress within 1 year and not get stuck in that anger phase. So you really want people to know that you don't have to, wait the 3 years that I did.
Yes, please
and
don't.
frolic in the anger.
Please don't.
And so I just wanted to point that out, because I know you've come so far and God has done such a mighty restoration in your life. But I also want the women to know that you too had a process, but they don't have to make that their story, because there are tools, your book and divorce care and community, that can help them and aid them into that. So that is amazing, right?
It is amazing.
And you've done a lot of work with divorce care. We're just talking about how you have seen people thriving and you could say expedite their healing while using these tools. How would someone going through a program like divorce care, how does that aid them in if they're parenting or co-parenting? How would you say that would be beneficial?
Oh yes, absolutely. I have seen, that's why it took me 3 years to find this program, and I wish I would have found it like within the first year of my divorce, because I saw how it really helps you as far as parenting and co-parenting. Because again,
Mhm.
you find out that you're not alone.
Yeah.
That's the one thing, because when you're isolated, you feel like, woe is me, I'm all alone, I'm never going to get through this mindset. But when you find a community like Divorce Care, it enables you to just be empowered to say, I'm not alone, I'm going to get through this. And the other piece of that, it just boils down to forgiveness. I remember that was another hard piece, or a hard pill for me to swallow, was the forgiveness piece. And once I totally surrendered that to God and said, you know what, the forgiveness is for me, for one, and not for him. It's to release me, because a lot of times you think, especially from a divorce, if I forgive him, if I'm kind to him, then I'm letting him out of the jail.
Yeah,
You know?
I'm making it okay.
Yes. And I'm like, what he did
Ruined
was
my
not
life.
okay.
Right.
Right, exactly. But that forgiveness is amazing. Like, I have seen people come through and they may not deal with the forgiveness at that level. They may just be like, oh, it's fine, I'm okay. I just want to be, for me and my children to be okay. So once I surrendered that to God,
Yeah.
once you surrender that forgiveness piece, it just enables us to just co-parent, where you realize this is an extension of
Mhm.
your children, this person that they love so very much, just as much as they love you.
Yeah.
So it is so important to make sure that we create that peace and that space for our children to still thrive.
Yes.
It's a broken home, yes, but if they see those two parents coming together and walking in forgiveness,
Yes.
then they can thrive and they can be okay. So that was big. I think the community, the Divorce Care, it really hones in on growing closer to God and forgiving.
Wow. And that's why you still facilitate, right?
Oh, yes.
You're 13 years post-divorce.
Yes. Yes.
And you still see the value because you've seen how it's changed lives.
Yes.
That's wonderful. And I really want women to know that there are tools and resources like your book, like Divorce Care, where they can
Mhm.
come and have that healing take place. And one of the things that you mentioned in your book was that you going through the 5 stages of grief, and it caused for you to have to visit, and you mentioned it earlier, your go-to emotion, which was anger. And then in you building that relationship with God, you saw that that go-to emotion of anger was just that. It was something that you went to in a time of hurt, but it also revealed something deeper to you, that was also something that you kind of inherited, that it was. So when you were able to explore that, what did you find? Because I think if we allow God to really open our eyes to some of the issues that were there prior to marriage, he can really do a work in us. So can you just tell us a little bit about when you had the time to sit with you learning that anger was a real problem for you, and that you had maybe even seen it modeled?
Right. Absolutely. Definitely. Someone said, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? That whatever you brought in, whatever you're dealing with in the pandemic, it's basically you brought that in. It wasn't like the pandemic caused you to eat, everything that you're eating right now, So I realized that in marriage, it definitely just highlights more of what you're already dealing with, or what we didn't, get healed from prior to marriage. So when the anger just superseded all other emotions, I realized that yes, in childhood I was, it's an anger issue in my family, in my mom, in my father's lives, where I've seen how anger can cause them to act out, or just learning and my mom was a young mother. She had me when she was 16.
Wow.
So she was just learning life still herself. But in that, her parenting, she would, walk around for days and hold grudges, against me. So I learned in the home, how to hold grudges, how not to forgive. And if, if there's a bunch of yelling going on. So I picked all that up to respond to that anger. So it was just basically something that I noticed growing up, and we just basically take those things into our adulthood if we don't heal properly.
Right, and then if we're not careful, then we're now modeling that behavior
Right.
for our children. And so
Exactly.
you were able to grab a hold of that, even though the divorce was not a quote unquote good thing, it's not something you desired.
Right.
It opened your eyes because that anger flared up so much. And so I wanted to point that out because each of us have that go-to emotion, and this is a great time for us to sit and see what is it that's coming up. What is it that we're showing our daughter? What is it that we're experiencing that we don't want them to experience or don't want them to model, but because we're so emotionally raw, we're not taking the time
Yes.
to look at that. So how can a mom who is so emotionally raw, how can she tell her daughter? How can she be aware of her daughter's own emotions? Because children need to heal through divorce care. We need to be, and you say that in your book, like, be aware of what your child is going through because they may be experiencing something as well. So can you help us with tools or tips on how we can be aware and kind of pay attention, even though we are experiencing, because I don't want to negate a mother's process and say you're being negligent, because I know she wouldn't want to be,
Exactly.
but she's
Absolutely.
so emotionally raw at this time. How can she monitor what her child is going through?
Right. It's definitely a challenging time, you know, because a lot of times when you're hurting and when you're broken, you're mostly self-focused. So I've seen that too. I was, you know, some women have babies and they are just throw themselves into parenthood. You know, some, you know, you deal with different things, or you know, how it was modeled as a child. If you were abandoned emotionally by your parents, that can sometimes, you know, fall into your own parenting style as well. So for me personally, I just focused on that. They were my lifeline. My children were my light, my lifeline, and my focus was I need to stay sane for my kids. You know what I'm saying? So that was the focus in making sure that I'm okay. So outside of that, I would, you know, connect with friends, connect with community, talk to people, get counseling, because I didn't want them to see that total broken side. Now I know some women go through divorce and they just can't help, their emotions are all over the place, and I get that. I remember when I was packing up our townhome and I was putting towels in a box and I just broke down in tears, and my daughter was just one, so she's just walking around me like, what's going on, you know? But that was just a moment. But I don't really remember a time where I did that again, because I just wanted to stay strong for them. And I know everybody is different. It was just for me that I had to have that peace. So definitely I would suggest that we as moms, we get the counseling we need. You know, take advantage of that, you know, whether it be through assistance, free, you know, counseling sessions, because I know at that time it's a very financial challenging season. There's so many programs out here, you know, there's Medicaid, there's so much that we have at our hands. Getting that counseling, putting yourself in healthy community. Around other mothers, you know, around other people. And that's why, again, the divorce care is good, because it gives you that a community where you can support each other, help each other out, babysit for one another, cook for one another. It's such a hard season where you just, you know, if you're depressed, if you're feeling lonely, if you're, you know, whatever's going on, I would just suggest that do not isolate.
Okay, isolation is definitely not an option. So do you think that when you're in that type of a community, while you were there, were you able to notice when your daughter was going through something, when your son was going through something? Like, how did divorce care and you doing your healing help you notice what was harming or hurting your kids and how they needed to heal?
Yes, my son, well, again, my son was 9 when I got a divorce. And he was just at a young age. His biological father wasn't present. So I was definitely concerned about him and how he was going to process through that season. I immediately, I don't know, we just needed something to keep us distracted. So I put him in football right after the divorce. And
Mhm.
we did football. You know, football is just, you know, you have to be present. Practices are 3 times a week, games on Saturday, and you kind of stay all day. So I believe that helped him with any aggression that he had but couldn't verbalize in that
Okay.
season.
Mhm.
I put him in football, and that was a great season. It wasn't until he was about 13, 14 that I began, probably when the hormones started, you know, raging, that I noticed that he was just expressing disrespect in the home, not motivated at school, not wanting to do his schoolwork. And that is when I started to notice it more. And then when I reacted, because I grew up in a house where you just yell, you know, to get your point across. And when I started responding to him in an unhealthy way, I knew it was time for counseling. Because I didn't know what he was dealing with, but I knew we weren't talking about it. So I
Right.
put him in counseling, and
Okay.
that helped just break down some of the walls
Okay, good.
in his life personally, and that kind of turned his life around, and he became more motivated in school. So that was like the win for him. Now my daughter, she was only 1, so she was a baby, and in my head I'm like, oh, she's good, you know, she still gets to see her dad every other weekend. He was thankfully a very active father from day 1 that he left, and I'm like, well, she's fine. But it wasn't until she started getting into pre-K, kindergarten, where she started to kind of act out in school, you know, just throwing herself on the floor. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? And still never really talked about it until she was 9. And she began to verbalize, because they told us in the parenting classes that we had to take, court appointed, that the children, they process at different stages of their lives. So you may have to revisit that conversation, you know. So she would ask me periodically, like, what happened? Or, you know, why aren't you and dad together? Or, you know, by this time her dad was already remarried. So she just began to ask those questions, and it wasn't until she began to express just total dislike towards her stepmother that I was like, okay, it's time. You probably need to go talk to someone about this. So I put her in counseling. Actually, I put her in the Divorce Care for Kids, because the Divorce Care for Kids has a program
Awesome.
that it like goes right alongside with the divorce care. So from 5 to 13 years, they support those kids in helping them navigate through that process. So that was so good. So even I had gone through the divorce care when she was 5. But I turned around when I saw that she was having a hard time. I put her in Divorce Care for Kids and allowed her to go through that 13-week program to kind of support her. So I was just very engaged. Like I said, I was just that mom that I was just very engaged in what they were doing and how they were responding, because I didn't read up on it and I didn't have a book, you know, to see how they were going to process it. I just saw it happen over time. So I think that's so important for parents to always continually pay attention and see how they're responding, and if it's going to happen, they're going to act out in school or home, or what that looks like, because every child is different.
So that's good. So always be aware of how your child is behaving, and even if it's delayed, you may think, like you were saying, oh, she's only 1, she's fine, and it didn't really start to reveal itself until years later. But still, be aware that there is likely going to be some type of healing that's going to have to take place. And you, as her mom, you're going to be able to know. If you're looking for it, it's going to reveal itself. Because all the literature I found was speaking towards teaching your child to cope, teaching your child to cope, teaching your child to cope. I'm like, I don't think I want to cope with anything. Because cope just means get through, get over it, hunker down. You can handle it. But with Christ, we know He's made us overcomers, right? He's made us victorious, and so we want our children to thrive. So I love the fact that you're encouraging counseling for your children as well, because this is a process that they're going through, and that once they start showing signs, even if it's not immediately, that there's going to be some tools that they will need as well.
Absolutely.
So that is. Thank you for sharing that. That is wonderful, because I know that's going to be valuable for so many moms.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's very important that our children are taken care of in that season. They're hurting, and they need to be heard, just like we have to take care of ourselves as parents, because we want them to have a different story than what we had.
Yeah, and especially with teens, you may see
Oh,
something,
yes.
some things flare up. Everyone knows parenting teens can be challenging. My son's only 12, but you know,
Yes.
we're
You're
on
like
the eve
right
of
there.
teen. The eve of teen.
You're right
Which I
there.
don't even know if that's even any better. But
Their hormones are raging.
they're raging. So I just want to encourage the moms of teen girls
Yes.
who are experiencing this and who are going through divorce or who are still healing from a divorce or a pending divorce
Yes.
to have these tools to help them, because that's what we're here for. We're here to help
Right.
you walk through this process, because there is light at the other side.
Oh, absolutely. And just
Absolutely.
gauging into their gifts and talents. That's one thing that I've learned. My focus was, what is she good at? What does she enjoy? What does she like? You know,
Mhm.
because I want her to thrive still, even coming from divorced parents. So that's another piece, just remembering to pay attention to see what are they good at, you know.
Right, that's so good. Now, you also speak about balance, and I want to touch on that just a little bit.
Okay.
You said that, okay, so you're encouraging healing, right? We're going to heal. We have to get through this process. We come out to the other side. We're at acceptance. We're forgiving. We're healing. But and also a piece of that is, I'm a person. I have likes. I have interests.
Right.
What would I like to do? So in your book, you encourage women to explore themselves again.
Oh, yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about the importance of that after divorce, exploring things
Yes.
for yourself again?
Absolutely. This point was driven more home to me more recently when I read a book by, I can't even remember her name now. It's called She's Still There.
Crystal Evans
Crystal,
Hurst.
yes, absolutely.
We
so
love
I,
Crystal.
yes, I
Sister
love
to
her.
Priscilla Shire.
Yes,
Yes.
the Evans family.
The Evans
Amen.
films, they're amazing.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's so important to not lose yourself, because you can even lose yourself in marriage.
Mhm.
We have to know that she's still there. We have to know that we are just a human that has loves, likes. We're called by God to not only be wives, but we're called to thrive and use our gifts and talents in the earth. We have
Mhm.
purpose.
Yes.
So that is so important, and that's one of the things that I, after my anger, after the healing, just began to realize, who am I, you know? And not only who am I, but whose am I? You know, why did God create me for such a time as this in the earth?
Right.
So I think it's so important, as separating, as healing from a divorce, to focus on your gifts, your talents. You know, take the gifts test. You know, like they have the Christian gifts, you know,
Mhm,
test.
mhm.
Take the test. You know, take the personality test that they have out there, because you want to know who you are, especially if you're one that got married really young and you didn't know who you were. You were just getting married because you knew you wanted to fall in love one day. You
Yeah.
watched too many Cinderella movies.
Right,
you know?
right.
So yeah, I'm very guilty of that. You know? Watch all the love movies, and that's just how it's going to be. But no, that is not marriage. So I think it's so important that that balance is there. As you are a mother, taking care of these children, doing your best to create a safe place for your children. I think it's so important to really hone in on your likes and loves and your gifts and your talents, because that the kids are going to grow up and they're going to leave. You know,
Mhm.
if God does not send you another mate in that time, then it's going to be just you. So you have to, you know, love yourself enough to find that balance so you can love yourself when your children leave.
Right, I love that too, because then once again, what are we teaching our daughters? Are we
Right.
teaching her that you get lost in motherhood, that you don't have a personhood, that you're not
Yes.
worth loving, and you're telling her that you're so lovable, God made you for a purpose, and you have so many gifts, and I want you to use them, but
Yes.
then you,
Right.
like that, do as I say, not as I do, and that's
Yes.
not what any of us want to teach our daughters. So thank you for
Exactly.
sharing that, because I think that a lot of moms need to have that permission to
Absolutely.
do something. And I remember that was something that I had to grasp too when my kids would be away. I'm like, well, what am I going to do?
Right.
And then it
I have
turned
no
to,
life.
what am I going to do?
Yes.
I can do whatever I want to do.
Exactly.
Huh. I don't have to make anyone's lunch or dinner or breakfast or So I want to encourage women to take that time in this season of their healing and moving
Yes.
forward to go ahead and find what God, those gifts and talents, explore that, right?
Yes.
Explore that side of yourself.
Exactly.
And I think you did a fabulous job of speaking to that in your book. Thank you so
Yes,
much
exactly.
for
Find that
reminding
joy.
us of that. That is so good.
Yes, that joy is amazing. Just finding that joy to say, like you said, what am I going to do? You know, where you're just like, wow, there's this joy and there's this peace about taking care of you and not feeling
Yeah.
guilty about it. You know, we have the mom guilt,
Yeah,
you know,
you don't have
where
to.
you just leave the house and you're like, oh my God, my kids, you know, they're going to be okay. And remembering that they're a gift from God. They're not ours.
Right.
You know, they
That's
are just
true.
here on borrowed time just like we are.
Right.
So I love the fact that God reminds us, do what I've called you to do. And that doesn't take away from those moms that are home, and because God
Yeah.
called them, because they're the moms that are home,
Oh
they
my
are
gosh.
the bomb.
They
They
are.
are crafting, they are teaching, they are doing more than I could ever do.
Me or you.
So
I
I
was
love,
not called to the stay-at-home mom ministry.
Right.
God bless y'all. God bless y'all. That is a job you don't get to clock out from.
Exactly.
There are no vacation days, no sick days. You're on call 24/7.
They're building and painting desks, and I've seen all kind of amazing things
Right.
where they are in that moment operating in their gifts and talents.
Yes.
They find that joy in that moment.
And we
So
should too.
yes, shout out to the moms that are in the home and then the moms that are in the marketplace. Just find that balance.
So now we are whole, we are healed. What thing do we not take with us into our next marriage? What are these expectations and things that were wrong on the first end that we don't want to take into our next? Because God is going to bring us through this. We're going to get through it. And I believe if He's given you a desire in your heart for marriage,
Yeah,
He's going to feel it. If that's from Him, it's because He's going to feel it if you do it His way, in His time.
absolutely.
So what do we not take with us? What do we let go?
Selfishness, definitely.
Selfishness,
Because
okay.
you do find that if you know when you come into a marriage, you be like, oh, I am kind of selfish, and that's what I noticed in my marriage. I was like, wow, I was selfish. You know, I did not like confrontation. You know, thinking again from childhood, like you make your mom mad, or you make someone's mad, they're gonna cut you off. They're not going to speak to you, you know? So the confrontation piece was like, okay, did we just have an argument? Is the relationship over? You know,
Right.
it's over, you know? But realizing that communication, healthy communication is okay. Disagreements are okay. That's a part of
That's
being in a
good.
marriage. That's a
That's
part
really
of
good.
having relationships, not just marriage, you know, girlfriend relationships,
Yes, that's
sibling
good.
relationships.
That's so good.
We have to disagree, and remembering that, let's talk about it. Let's figure out what happened. And
That's
that
so
comes
good.
in the value. Do we value that relationship enough to talk about it? So that's definitely what I've learned. Definitely just communication is key. Not being afraid of confrontation, definitely.
Yes.
And just putting down that selfishness. And it's amazing how you can still have selfishness with children. You know, when you come into a marriage,
Right.
you're like, wait, I thought I was not selfish because I always give my kids food.
Whatever I have.
Exactly, exactly.
Wow, that's so good. So I just want everyone to know that God has blessed Lashana to get to the other side of her journey, and He's given her beauty for ashes. So you have opened your heart to love again, and in 52 days,
51, 52, yeah, one of those.
you'll be saying "I do" to the
Yes.
man that God has intended for you,
Absolutely.
which is such a blessing. So 13
Absolutely.
years, was it worth it to get
Oh
to here?
my God. It was so worth it. I was very upset about the time that God made me wait because I had a lot of junk
Yes.
to get out of me, stuff from childhood, healing from a divorce.
Mhm.
I just couldn't believe it. Like, I met a lady right after my divorce, and the first lady I had ever met divorced. Because, you know, like you said, you never walk down the aisle thinking you're going to get a divorce. So the first time I saw someone or met someone after my divorce, oh, you're divorced? And I asked her, how long have you been divorced? And she was like, oh, 5 years. I'm like, oh, 5 years. I thought that I was going to get married within a year or two after the divorce.
Right.
So when she said 5 years, I was heartbroken. So, but now God made me wait 10 years because I've been courting, I guess you want to say, dating in the last 3 years, my now fiance.
Oh,
And
who's amazing. We love him.
yes, I do love him.
He's an awesome man of
yes,
God, too.
He is. 10 years. He made me wait 10 years. And I wasn't looking for anyone, like they always say. They come when you least expect it. And I used to hate that term. Because I would be like, I'm always expecting it. How is he going to come?
Right.
But walking into purpose, finding that balance, I didn't expect it. So he made me wait 10 years. So I'm very happy to say that I'm walking into a new season.
And that's a blessing.
Yeah.
That is a blessing. Now, your book is available for people to order. How do they get your book?
Yes, absolutely. It was a self-published book, so it is on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the main platforms that they can find the book.
And we will have the link for the book in the video description so that
Yes.
people will be able to go ahead and grab that. And you mentioned that you did a lot of reading during this season. Are there any other books? I know you just mentioned She's Still There by Crystal
Yes.
Evan-Hurst.
Yeah.
Are there any other resources that you found helpful for women who are coming out of divorce as they're going through this process, this healing process? What are some of the books that you would recommend?
Yes, absolutely, because I think that's very important. Reading. Some people didn't grow up reading. I grew up reading, so that was just basically my go-to, you know. So I would definitely suggest, if you are a reader, even if you're not a reader,
Get the
I would
audiobook.
get the audiobook, but sit still and take notes while you're listening, you know.
Yes.
But because I love the pages, but definitely I would suggest some books. Beth Moore is a very good author. I've read 2 of her books, which was one was So Long Insecurity, dealt with a lot of insecurity issues, and Get Out of That Pit. That is another good book of her, because you know you're basically in a pit when you're depressed and you know solving over a lost marriage. Joyce Meyer is a good one that I would go to. One was
great catalog.
yes,
Just so many. Yeah.
yes. Oh, right. I probably read several, but I'll just talk about the approval addiction, because I had that issue with approval addiction, and the mind game. So the battlefield of the mind with Joyce Meyer, and there's another book called The You Plan, and that's a good book to read after you've gone through a divorce. So. Trust me, I have like a library at home, so we can sit here all day and talk about books, but those are like a few that I've definitely read on the journey.
So we'll get that from you. And if you have a list of books that you want to recommend, just
yes.
we'll go ahead and include those so the ladies will have some things to refer to. If they've read some, they can add more. It'll be great. So
absolutely.
Well, this has been wonderful, LaShawna. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
I'm just so blessed to be here. Thank
Yes.
you for inviting me to speak. Like, you know, with divorce care, you always think everybody knows about this, right? No, a lot of people don't know about this.
And divorce care. How do people find a divorce care? Is it something that they have to go to a campus? I didn't even touch on that. How do people find out more about divorce care?
It's nationally known, and it's throughout all churches, many churches in the States. So they can go to divorcecare.org.
Okay.
And you can pin that. But all they need to do is put in their zip code, and it will bring up churches in their local area. Right now, everyone is virtual.
Right.
Well, a lot of churches are virtual. So if you don't feel comfortable with going back into the church, you can go online. We have a group running right now through Victory Church, but it is amazing, and it is national. All you have to do is put your zip code in, and you can find
one. So there's a resource for you. There's a resource for you out there that's great, and that's for you and for your child. That you'll be able to find that.
Exactly.
And thank you so much, LaShawna. This has been great. Such a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Did you enjoy that episode? Well, it's not over yet. We want to keep this discussion going. Hop over to the Cherish Stoners Revolution Facebook group and leave a comment now. If this content is engaging, helpful, and empowering, please subscribe and share with your friends. Let's be real, parenting teens can be hard, but you are who God chose to guide her to adulthood. Keep going, Mom. You have everything she needs. God's equipped you for this, and we're here to help supplement. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next episode.